During these past 2 weeks, my main goal was to polish my game a little bit more and make it more visually appealing, and since I'm quite a picky person, it took me a bit more time than I expected. But the final result turned out quite nice. As you can see now, the environment models look way more better than the previous ones. They aren't as repetitive and add more depth to the visuals of my game. This is the only room that I managed to polish fully so far, but I'll be adding more in the upcoming devlogs. I also added this see-through wall shader, so you can finally see where your character is when standing behind a wall, and it's also being applied to the enemies and projectiles as well. Before adding this, I was considering removing the walls, but for some reason it didn't feel quite right, and it was quite hard to implement as well, so for now I'll see if this shader will be enough to get the job done. With those changes in mind, I also adjusted a bit of my lightning colors. The colors of the light that the torches produced earlier were a bit too saturated and orange for my taste, so I toned it down and now it's much more pleasing to the eyes. I also tweaked a bit of color correction, so now there is less of one dominant color which was blue before, and it's much more evenly spread out. When adding props such as random pillars in a room, I came to realize that my AI doesn't have any field of view detection, and it could basically see through walls and ignore any environmental aspect in my game. Due to this issue, whenever the AI was in the player's attack range, he would mindlessly shoot his magic attacks to the player, ignoring the fact that the player would be hiding behind a wall. So in order to combat that, I implemented some basic raycasting to check if the player is in the AI's eyesight, and if it's not, make the AI follow the player until he is in his point of view. Speaking of AI, I added a new enemy type called the Trinity Guardian, which basically can use one of the 3 existing combat styles upon spawning in. So his first style is the blue one, which represents the defensive style. Its main trait having a shielding ability, which can shield a random enemy and protect it from one upcoming player's projectile. My main goal with this combat style is to force the player to time his special attacks correctly, so he wouldn't waste his strongest attack on a shielded ability. Next up, the green one represents growth and peace. Its responsibility is to keep his allies alive by providing an AoE healing effect, which is being applied every 5 seconds and restores 5 health for each enemy. The goal with this style is to make the player think which enemy he should prioritize attacking first, so should he finish the current attacking enemy, or should he focus on a healer before he's able to cast his healing spell? And last of all, the red one represents offensive style, with the ability to shoot out 3 projectiles out of his trident and have a better chance of hitting the player. This style sorta complements the other 2 to balance out between the offense and defense. Hopefully this enemy type with 3 different combat styles will bring more dynamic fights that will require the player to think who to prioritize first, especially when you get the shielding and healing types. I'm really happy on how this enemy type turned out, and I'm really looking forward to adding more dynamic enemies such as this one in the future. If you have any ideas on what kind of enemy it should be, leave a comment down below. Moving on, with the new enemy type, I also included their weapons to the chest drop table, so that means that the player will be able to use those weapons as well. I will always try to include majority of the weapons that the enemies use for the players to wield, because it always disappointed me a bit whenever I used to play RPGs, and I just couldn't wear any cool weapons that I saw enemies were using. A game like Adventure Quest Worlds does a good job of letting the player use whatever weapon he wanted, and I certainly want to achieve something like that. Next up, I added a hub area for my game. In here, most of the interactions with the other characters will happen, and it's basically just gonna be like an interactive main menu, which is, in my opinion, more fun and less static. Finally, I implemented a loading screen to my game, so now whenever you're loading a level, instead of having a frozen image, you'll get a nice and simple dynamic loading screen. That's gonna be it for the changes. Now let's talk about the stuff regarding the roadmap, particularly about the first part of it. My first goal that I set is to finish a playable demo version until somewhere around the start of the autumn. I'm not sure if that's even remotely possible, given the fact that I'll still need to add so many things, but we will see how the things will go. As for the demo, I want to completely finish the content of the first level dungeon, meaning that I'll have to make at least 5 different enemy types, so I need to add 2 more. Then I want to add at least 1 boss at the end of the level, and have a little bit of story as well. Speaking of the story, I'll probably talk more regarding that subject in the next episode, since I really want to work on the dialogue system next and add my first character to the game. And that includes a little bit of story and the art itself. Speaking of art, I'll have to figure out how I should handle music and sound effect creation, since I have little to no experience in that field. So it will be great to hear some advice or even receive help in terms of that subject. So if you're willing to help and lend some advice, just hit me up on Twitter. Also, I want to give you some of the updates about my life in general. I recently finished university, got my software engineering degree, so once the summer ends I'll have to search for a job, meaning that when I will find one, I'll have less time to dedicate myself on this project, since right now I'm working on it from morning to night, while when I'll have work I will not be able to do that unfortunately. So I really need to work on this project strategically, and hopefully I'll manage to release the polished demo in time. I really want others to try my game out and just have fun and pleasing experience, and I just want to write a fun story along the way as well. Oh, and also, if you notice that there's something wrong in my updates, like a feature that you're not sure is really the best and stuff like that, please let me know, because I really want to polish this game as much as possible. Because looking back at my older devlogs, I seriously can't believe that my eyes were okay with such large amount of blue colors everywhere, for example. So yeah, please let me know if there's anything wrong. Also, as you already noticed, this devlog is a bit longer than usual, so I apologize if you enjoy the shorter format. I just want to try out the longer format and talk more in detail on what I have to offer on this project. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today. Let me know what you liked about this devlog, and be sure to leave a thumbs up if you want. I'm gonna leave a full playthrough of my current version of the game if anyone is interested. And anyways, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.